Six-pack Lapadat. I got my man Ashton, the returning king, man. And this time the throne was heavily contested. The hype on this one, Ashton. The hype going into this, it's a three-way battle. It's very easy for people to have gotten lost in you versus Bobb, but Keenan was definitely a threat. I know he finished third outside of you guys, but Keenan's up there. But you and Bobb, my goodness. And, we were talking right before we started recording right now, how you got fired up for this one. The hype on Bobb last year ended off Bobb won best lifter of USAPL Nats. Bobb won like lifter of the year. He had the highest, I think, did he not have the highest formula? Or am I lying about that?
Ooh,
I think I remember because
he
Taylor
might have
Atwood
last
comment.
year. He
Yeah,
might.
because I remember Taylor Atwood saying, only because I let you,
Yeah.
famously. And Bobb had the number one. He had his finger up like I'm number one. And there's whatever. Anyways, point being that building is the hype between the showdown between you two, crazy hype. And the hype between Bobb alone, warranted because he's an absolutely special talent, crazy hyped. And some people thought this would be a passing of the torch of sorts, maybe, a new a new reign of sorts as well in this weight class with Bobb over you. And
Hmm.
you were on the podcast last time, like, this year I'm going to destroy everybody. You were fired up by it. And some people will avoid competition. You leaned in and we're like, okay, so we all know, like, we're going to get into the actual day of and talk about the battle itself and how you feel about it. And then the future as well, where you're going to end up. But before we get there, tell me about leading into this. Tell me your thoughts, how motivated you were. Tell me about leading into this hype, by far the most hype battle of USAPL Nats.
Yeah, so this was a pretty big one. What kind of was happening during all of the training and everything is the biggest thing for me was seeing all of the people saying what they were saying, right? Oh, Bob era, it was kind of a thing where a lot of people placed their trust in Bob to win, and I didn't necessarily entirely like disagree with that sentiment. It was just a matter of it almost kind of took on this form where people were kind of acting like, oh well, he's gonna win, and it's just not even gonna be like a thing. He's just the best, and that's really all there is to it. And I was like, is it really like that? In my mind, I'm like, it might be a lot closer than that. And I think Bob knew that too. And Keenan also knew that. And so for me, that really added to a lot in terms of hype to like my training and going into the competition, because in my mind I was like, well, I'm not going to respond to any of this stuff like publicly. I'm just going to save it and let it marinate all the way up until the day, and then we'll see who comes out on top on the day. And by the time we got through squats, in my mind I was like, I can win this. So that kind of was sort of the pinnacle and peak. In terms of hype, I will also say a big factor for me was moving back to Texas. Um, so I just came back here recently, and since then, training has actually been really, really productive and really good. It's been good to be back in my old stomping grounds.
When all this is happening, like, I think the one of the pinnacles with the Bobb hype, I think he had attempted 1,000 kilos in prep. And did he get that 1,000 kilo or did he just miss? I think he just missed, right? But it was
Just the
close. Or
Yep.
yeah. But it made people, just the attempt of made the door swing open in terms of people's imagination, and the hype really got crazy. He started doing things like, I don't have all this training off by heart, but he was like, wasn't he doubling like 955 or 950, or like, he was doing crazy things. Whereas when you're doing stuff like that, you start thinking, well, where's your top end singles? And again, like 955 or whatever is off the top of my head, but it was some crazy doubles, crazy top
Right.
end SBD days that were just insane. When you were seeing this yourself, were you thinking, were you still 100% believing I could beat this guy? What were your thoughts on all this?
Absolutely. Um, so my mentality going into it was when I saw his training, I know for a fact that when it comes to um rep carryover to a 1 rep max, I know that 2 reps for me and 2 reps for Bob in terms of what it means for our 1 rep max is not the same at all. So his 2 rep, I would say, is probably a lot closer to a 1 rep max, whereas with mine, it's a lot further away. So for example, if um if I squat, 750 for two, I'm pretty confident I can hit 800. Whereas I think Bob would hit like 775 or something. Right. So that's one thing. So I'm like, that's one way to kind of rationalize that. And I think that's absolutely true of us. And then secondarily, my training was going pretty good too. So I intentionally didn't want to overreach too aggressively in training because one, I didn't want to get injured. Um, which kind of played out in an interesting way anyway. And then two, um, I just wanted to be able to hit numbers where I would be confident that on the meet day I'd be able to hit what I needed to win and to build another PR total. So while watching his training, and crazy as it was, I told myself, yeah, I can. This is beatable. Um, I just have to, I just have to show up. I got to show up, and I got to show up every day and be intentional with everything I do. And that's sort of what I did leading into this meet.
That's really like in terms of you analyzing being, I understand he's doubling, and you could easily crawl into your own head and be like, oh my God, well, when I double this much, it means my single's here. And it's good that you actually said to yourself, that might not be the case. His double isn't my double in terms of the percentage of my single. And you could eat, a lot of people would have freaked themselves out. A lot of people would have been, especially, I don't even think people necessarily, you see these freaking calculators online where it's like, enter your rep
Yeah,
and
that's
the amount
calculated.
of reps you rep. Those calculators never work. Those are so bunk, man, because it's different for everybody, let alone a universal calculator like that. But we do things like this as powerlifters. We do things like this as, in the preview shows, people often come on a preview show and be like, look, I did the math and this is what I project for this individual. That's why there's no such thing as no, you didn't do the math. You're guessing. When people use that term for preview shows, do the math. This is where I predict they're going to be at. Stop with this is where I predict, but there's no such thing as doing the math because you're not, it doesn't add up like that. It's total guesswork and it's all different for everybody. And then, oh, by the way, within the last week or two, everything can change based off of, and here follows into my next questions, body weight
Mhm.
and injuries and fatigue and things like that. For Bob, he openly said, since that 1,000 kilo attempt, I haven't been the same. He's like,
Yep.
something happened, overreach, whatever. Whereas you said, I'm staying in the pocket. Thank you very much. I'm okay if you want to handle the hype. You take the hype. I'll hang in the pocket and stay fresh. So maybe how fresh were you in terms of injuries and the body weight? Were you surprised all three of you guys were 105 point something when Bob's talking about going 120? And it could have been an arms race, so to speak, in terms of size. If
Yep.
all you guys were like, who's going to blink? Who's going to show up 110 kilos, have a 5 kilo body weight event, be half a weight class up on the rest of the opposition? Turned out none of you guys, but it could have happened, especially if Bob's talking, I'm going 120. I don't know if this is a bluff, if it's real, if it's, were you surprised he ended up going 105? Why did you go 105?
Yeah. So for the body weight thing, I wasn't too shocked about Bob and Keenan because I'd kind of been monitoring their stuff and even just like their physical appearance, right? Like everything. I've been watching everything from both of them, the whole train up all the way up, and analyzing all their training, like their physical appearance, everything, right? Every detail. And I'm just like, I don't think either of these guys are going to weigh in above 235. They don't look big enough to be that heavy to fill out a 110 and to fill out 110 quickly too, right?
Mm.
So from the time we all sort of basically signed up for nationals and we all were in it, there wasn't a lot of time between then and the start of the meet for them to gain 5 kilos of body weight. Um, just really difficult task to do, especially if you have to just force food down and overeat and stuff like that. So in my case, interestingly enough, I was actually heavier a good portion of the prep. I was like sometimes waking up around like 240 pounds. But when I got to Memphis, I got there about 5 or 6 days early, and I lost weight in Memphis, not because I was like, nervous or freaking out. Like I was actually relatively like relaxed. The issue was is I didn't really like the food that much there, so I just didn't eat a whole lot. And then I was, watching the meat and stuff like that too, and so I just naturally shed, a few pounds. And I imagine, as oftentimes occurs as you're gaining or losing a lot of weight, there's like water manipulation and stuff like that. So no doubt, some of that weight that came off really quickly was probably water weight, and then a couple of pounds also of just not eating enough throughout the week. Um, so that's kind of what happened in my case when it comes to body weight. So I was actually shocked at how light I was when I weighed in. I
Hmm,
was like, well, I might as well have just lost the extra point 0.8 and just weighed 105. And this could have counted, an open powerlifting for both weight classes. But
that's true. That's
yeah,
true.
so it was funny to me. But it was all good. So that was super interesting to see. In my opinion, I think as far as 120 goes, I think I could actually probably gain the weight easier than Bob could, at least at this time. But I do think, you know, that he will probably be better off in that weight class, and I'd probably be better off in 105. And that's probably later in the conversation, like a different discussion. But as far as injuries go, because that was the second part of your question, um, most of the prep I was actually pretty healthy. So I didn't really have any major issues. Like my pec, and shoulders were fine. Nothing was hurting upper body wise. Everything was doing really good until like the last like 6 weeks, last 5 or 6 weeks. And then and as is what happens sometimes with heavy training, I started to have a lot of just like lower and mid back flare ups, which again like does happen, especially during preps for really big meets sometimes. And when that happened, it kind of made specifically like deadlifting and squatting very painful. But I was able to sort of hit my heaviest training 4 weeks out from the competition, right? And so it was really painful, but I got it done. And I told myself, if I hit this, I know I'm in a good position to win for a fact. Because as I spoke to earlier, I know how these numbers in my training would translate to like a meet day event. So once that happened, I was able to spend the 4 weeks going into the meet lifting a lot lighter, like very submaximally. And I did that all the way into the meet. And that was actually really beneficial for me. And for competing and with the loads I'm starting to lift now in competition, that actually might be the better way to go into a meet going forward, actually. So I was
That's
able to
interesting.
mitigate some of those issues like with the back, but it was really painful. And then there were game day decisions that had to be made as well, like pulling sumo, which I didn't train this prep.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, we could get into deadlifts when we get into the day, but first off, it's kind of, is that unique, you think, to peak, so to speak, with the top end heavy stuff a month out? And then I don't know if I use the term taper for 3 weeks or a month. It wasn't necessarily a taper, but just lighter intensities. Is that relatively new for you? I haven't heard too much of people doing that actually.
We've tried it once in the past. It didn't work as well then, but also the training style we had then was a little bit different. So I think that we got more data since then, because that was a couple of years ago. We got more data since then. We
Mm.
learned stuff about how I respond to training, and we were able to effectively implement that strategy for this competition. And for me, it's really good because for me, I don't need to lift crazy heavy loads 2 or 3 weeks out from the meet. For me, so I think some of this is, of course, obviously physiological. And I'm like most recovered if I can lift 4 weeks out, heaviest on all three, versus, 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out. So one, I'm much more recovered. And then two, the psychological aspect is also a big important factor here as well. Because I know in the back of my mind, if I show up to that meet and I feel good, anything they put on the bar, I can probably do it. So one, feeling recovered and feeling good, and then that has a psychological effect as well, and you kind of gain a competitive edge and advantage there. So that's kind of what happened with me. I noticed with this sort of peaking style, it worked out really well and in my benefit actually on the day. I was able to walk away with a squat PR, locked out a deadlift meet PR, but it got called 2-1. And after watching the footage again, I thought it was a fair call. I think it could have gone either way. Um, and then a meet PR total as well. And I walked away with two sort of drug tested all time records in squat and total. So it worked.
Makes sense on the surface when you think about it, where you peak, hit some massive numbers, and then you have like another second ramp up, if you will, almost like 4 week block peaking. So then your next 4 weeks, you'll peak again and it'll be meet day, as opposed to
Yep. Exactly.
peaking, hitting your biggest lifts right before tapering and then expecting to hit more again. I
Yeah,
guess it
that's
kind of
tougher.
depends, right?
Yeah, it does depend. For some people, it works. For me, I've noticed that at this point in my training career, my competing, and just with my life in general, like all the sort of other variables to consider in my lifestyle, it's more difficult to do that now. Hit those heaviest lifts 2 weeks out, taper aggressively, and then show up. I can do it and it'll work, but it isn't. I don't think I'll be getting the most bang for my buck going that way forward. So I think what we did this meet worked out very, very well, and we were both really pleased with the outcome. And something else to think about. Since this was a head-to-head battle, a three-way head-to-head battle, which is really, really intense, because you got your eyes on two guys and not one, and any one of them could easily win. That it's not guys fighting for second place, it's not guys fighting for first place, it's everyone gunning for first place, and just depending on how attempts pan out, anyone could win. So with all that said, on the day, so I went 7 for 9. I hit 2134 in the total, so 968 kilos. So the third deadlift, I was doing the numbers in my head, right? I'm like, all right, so how would this have panned out if I went 9 for 9? So the third deadlift, 856, I think it was 388.5 or something like that.
Right.
That would
That's
have
what it
given
was.
me, I think, 985.5. And then my third bench that I missed at lockout, and that was also an interesting story because this was a pretty fast paced meet, and bench warm ups were interesting. I took two bench warm ups before opening with like 452. But so I didn't feel as stable during bench, but I missed right at lockout with 220 kilos, which honestly I was expecting that to actually fly, so that was interesting. But I was thinking a 9 for 9 day, that would have been a 990.5 total at 105.8. So
You just missed those lifts. It wasn't like you were like far off. Like,
no, yeah. So but it's interesting, but it also just speaks to how important attempts are when it's a head to head, because one missed lift could mean such a dramatic slash to your total. Um,
mm,
so it was just really interesting to kind of see how all of that panned out. But strength wise, coming into this meet to speak to the peaking strategy, 990.5 was there. I felt the strongest in a competition I've ever felt that day, for sure.
it's just like Matt Gary says. You win when you land lifts. And so, like you have to go with as close to 9 for 9 as you can. And to your point, you miss one, it could set you back so great. Now, here's the good part. If you miss one, it's not the end of the day, because it's not everybody. There's a chance that your competitors are going to miss as well.
Yep.
The chances of them going 9 for 9, it's just like yourself. So if you miss a squat or a bench, you got to keep your chest out, head up, and be like, look, it somebody else is going to miss as well. This isn't over yet. So,
Someone's gonna make a
but
mistake.
right, just do the best you can with that day. If they do go 9 for 9 and you go 7 for 9, you were capable of, if not quite 990, let's say 987 and a half. Well, frig, that's where it hurts you. You're like, oh, shit. But it's hard to tell come meet day. Did you think that 968 coming into this, would you have thought 968 would be the winning number?
Yeah. I think I openly said a few times that my prediction for winning the 110 weight class was probably going to be mid 2100 range. So 2134 won it, about 15 pounds, 16 pounds off of 2150, which is the number that I predicted would win the weight class. So that's actually right around what I expected, not far off at all, maybe 7.5 kilos off of what I expected. So I think that's a pretty good, that was a pretty accurate estimate that I had, because I knew it wasn't going to be 2200. I think that was too much of a stretch for the weight class at this time, at least at a national level. But right, so we're considering context too. So the reason why my prediction was lower than a lot of people may have thought or may not have thought, it was, everyone's like, oh, 1,000 kilos, for, palm brush. But, I just realized that that wasn't realistic. It's not that we're not strong enough per se, or that we couldn't get strong enough. It's just a matter of on game day, as you and I know, faced, head-to-head competition. You've seen it on the world stage, you've seen it on the national stage. Totals don't always register as big as you think, and it's because people are playing to win. They're not playing to put up the biggest total possible. At this 2023 Raw Nationals, I was not playing to put up the biggest total possible. I was playing to win, which is completely different. And I want to emphasize that it is not the same at all. So my goal wasn't to put up the biggest total I possibly could and potentially risk missing something. My goal was to go in and win. And, by virtue of winning, I knew I was going to PR my competitive total anyway. So I made that my primary goal for this meet.
Yeah, a couple things on that. First off, you not getting too carried away with it as well in your own head will it'll keep you within range and not overreaching training, which to an extent, Bob openly said, I think that one day taxed me pretty heavily. Whereas if you get too hyped in your own head, like I need 1,000 kilos to do this, you start buying into that hype, you're going to push in training, maybe even over push,
More
and you can start
aggressively.
frying your nervous system. Whereas if you take more like, look at to your other point in terms of meet day, if we were just in the gym and it's like, let's just try to find your max squat, your max bench, and your max deadlift. No such thing as 3 attempts. No such thing as, you only get 3 to find it. You go as many as you want. Wow, that's close. I think it can go a little even heavier. You just load on whatever increments you want. It's totally different. So when you see people doing SBD days in the gym, and they're crazy numbers. In your head, like you had alluded to, that's not a powerlifting competition. Though. Even an SBD day is not a powerlifting competition because you could easily find your max lifts on all 3 with no competition nipping you at the heels and no attempts need to be made. It's all just completely up to you. That is not how powerlifting is actually done as a sport. That's where a lot of people, if they've never made it to that level, in that level of competition, and realize how different it is, you got
Mhm.
lot numbers, you got a jury, you got, the whole nine, the refs on the platform. It is, and warming up, none of it is to your own timeline. And you only have 3 attempts. You don't just keep going on your squat. Wow, I'm having a better day than expected. Let's do another one. No, there is no 4th attempt. You're stuck at 3.
It's
So you
over.
left
Yeah.
10 kilos on the table. You left 10 kilos on the table. It's not that easy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It requires a lot of precision, especially at this level of competition, for a sport that's literally, just us lifting weights. It's actually, there's a lot of intricacy. There's a lot of intricacies. There's, definitely a fair amount of nuance in it. And, it's not as simple at this level competitively. Like it actually does require a good level of precision and, sort of delineating and outlining, a very, very good plan going into it, which is what, I do for these events. And that really helps me win them. Um, so yeah, in terms of predictions, like 968 is right around ballpark what I was thinking. I was going to probably predict around 975, but I'm not surprised that 968 was the winning number. Yeah.
And that was huge for you to stay on point in terms of game plan. Now, speaking of, who was handling you on that day? Was it a team? Was it one person in particular who took the head of it, or how did that work?
Yeah. So essentially what was happening was as Bob and I were competing, Marcellus was primarily handling us and one other lifter also in the same weight class, but he wasn't in contention for winning, but he was putting up some really big bench presses, like over 500-pound bench presses. Um, but yeah, we also had some other people from the team back there helping with us too. So it wasn't just Marcellus by himself. So for me, there's my friend Christian, um, the king of hype.
Yeah.
That guy. Yeah, he was back there. And for almost all these big events, he's always there with me. So he's usually like kind of primarily helping and assisting with handling like my stuff and my attempts and things like that.
Mhm. Yeah, it makes it, I mean, it would be crazy running around with 3 guys on plate. You
Yeah.
beat the team. Even just the weights you guys throw on for warm-ups and everything would be crazy. And organizational, getting like change attempts in on time and the whole 9 would be freaking crazy.
It's difficult. Yeah. Even with help, it's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, keeping abreast of it. Now, when you got to Memphis, what was the vibe like for this USAPL Nats? This one's a little different. Um,
Mhm.
a couple key people weren't there, as well as there's a bit of a feeling. I don't want to speak for you. Let me know if I'm off or on. But there's a bit of a feeling vibe here where we know a lot of people now are announcing that they're coming over to IPF. And some people were watching this almost like one of the last great USAPL Nats where this crew's going to be there anyways. There's like a lot of people were heavily hinting, I'm probably going to leave after this Nats.
Mhm.
And it's almost like when you give your 2 weeks notice at your job and you're walking the halls knowing like, I'm not going to be back here. And I'm not going to, and a lot of these people are going to be coming over as well with you. But
Yeah.
was there a sense of that? What did it feel like when you got there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll answer as honestly and genuinely as possible. So I it's interesting. I kind of got a little bit of both of those vibes over the week. Well, yours and maybe an opposing one, both. So I definitely got some of, wow, like a lot of these guys that are winning, or are placing high or doing well may not be here next year, probably won't be here next year. There's some big names that are, that intend to go over and compete within the IPF. And for good reason too. And we might get into that later as well. But so there was definitely that side of it. And that was kind of there for me a little bit, like it was present. But watching the meet and seeing some of the depth of talent in some of the weight classes, I think some of the weight classes are going to be fine. So, for instance, one weight class that I think was criminally underrated at this meet, just my personal opinion, and I think a lot of it was overshadowed by Rondel's performance, but I think the 125s actually put up a hell of a show. They put up a hell of a show. I mean, the winning total, was 950.5, which is nothing to sneeze at. From the 120 world record, that's like 20 something kilos off. Um, and and I think top three in most of the bigger weight classes, 110 and above, top three, top four in every weight class, I think was 2,000 plus, 2,000 pounds plus in the total, which again, nothing to sneeze at. In tested powerlifting, a 2,000 pound total is still sort of the holy grail of, of tested powerlifting, in my opinion. It's just such a massive amount of weight to be able to put up and say you've done a ton. Um, there's some depth in those classes. And there's a couple of guys that I know personally in some of those classes that are getting very, very strong and coming up, and they intend to stay in the USAPL. So I think for some of the weight classes, there's definitely a good depth of talent. But then there's other classes where it seems like there's a big vacuum, right? So 100 kilos, for instance, there was a big vacuum there. The winning total was like a 19-year-old kid, putting up, I think, a 1,930-pound total. And it was just crazy watching that because I'm like, wow, none of these guys are putting up 2,000. I thought back to my days as a junior competing at 220. I was like, this class looks a lot different than it did then. Um, so some classes I think are already kind of feeling what you're talking about, but I think some weight classes will be okay. Like I think 125s will be okay. I'm not too sure about 110s right now. I think 100s are developing. I think 90s will still be good because some of the top contenders, I think, are just kind of not really experienced competitors yet, and they still need to refine their competitive abilities in order to show up better. But there's still definitely potential there for the USAPL to be very, very competitive and to have competitive battles in depth in a lot of weight classes. Probably not all of them, but a good number of them. But with that said, I do think that the dynamic and the field is going to look different after this next year, for sure.
It, yeah, the 120s is Devin Williams you're referring to. I actually had him on the podcast, and I'll be dropping that podcast as well. And he's considering coming over as well, though, because
Oh,
Tony
that's
Cliff.
interesting.
Well, here's the thing. You know, everybody's going to be look at worlds now. Devin even mentioned himself. So Tony Cliff won worlds with 952.5. Now he's going to Sheffield. But he's also like, so I can look at that, but I also have to look at what is Bob going to do? And if Bob goes up to 120, but then he's also telling himself, Devin is like, but do I doubt myself? He put on like 50 kilos on his total. So he's like, maybe he doesn't put out 50 kilos, but Eagle, I could still bump my own total as well. And
Yeah.
who knows what
Walking with
Bam
like
Bam does?
970. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So a lot of people are going to be humming and hawing. Obviously Perk, Petrie are coming over.
Mhm.
We'll see. Folk, I don't know what he's doing if he comes over. Um, we'll see what some of these guys do. It'll be interesting, but it was. I don't know what next year's USAPL is going to look like. I'm not sure. A lot of it is heavy rumors, and people. Not everyone is full come out saying I'm coming over. But when you look at the 75s, like both Joe Bornstein and Perk are coming. To
Mm,
your point, there's some people up and coming that might stay
that
and
might do
develop into
well, and yeah,
something. But do they stay long enough and then say, "Hey, I'm jumping over IPF as well, and let me battle it out"? The reason why you might is because the IPF side is starting to ramp up with some of the events SBD is doing, not just Sheffield, but there's other meets coming down the pipeline that are getting interesting. And I can't totally discuss too much things, but you've probably seen there's a money meet happening. There's more things happening. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
so
And there's also the thing too with the USAPL right now, like, I think that they're trying to adopt like this international approach, and it's really interesting to see how that's panning out. So I got the privilege of competing in Korea last year, which was
yeah,
awesome, by the way, super cool. That was like that was one of the coolest meets I ever got to do. That was super fun and just a wonderful place to be. But with all that said, you know, that international presence is obviously grossly underdeveloped compared to the IPF. Like it might as well, it basically doesn't exist in comparison, right? And we both know
correct.
that. So once you win nationals, it's like, man, what do you do? And it's like, honestly, like a world championship, the world games, like there's some enticing meets that are just kind of there. And, that you have a chance to win it all. And it's like, do I take that chance and go and try to win it all? Or, do I stay and do this? And, and nothing, and I'm not knocking it, but the Arnold, honestly, not really one of my favorite meets, just in general. Like I'm not a huge fan of the Arnold. I never really have been. I've done it a few times and I've like tried to get into that feel for it because some people love the Arnold, but or at least competing there. But it was
Hey,
lackluster.
why is that you think?
Yeah, for me, it's mostly because it was entirely based on dots, honestly.
Mm,
Like I stopped caring about dots maybe like 3 years ago. Like I haven't been too aggressive on dots, right? Like I've considered it and factored it into my performances, but it hasn't been something that I've intentionally tried to maximize, which I think is also a really important point to make. Because some people were asking me about dots this and dots that, and are you trying to beat your old dots? And I'm like, I mean, like I enjoy like what we did, me, Bob, Keenan, what we did last weekend, that was like one of the best, like the premier, sort of head to head battles, in powerlifting and where it gets crazy competitive and heads butt, and that's what it's about. Like that's what people like watching. Sure, we do love to marvel at the crazy performances, right? Like Perkins this past week, Rondel Hunte this past week. We can marvel at those, and those are fantastic. But the thing with those performances is you can consider that they're not too worried about the competitive depth. They're not worried about missing an attempt to lose. They're just worried about putting up the biggest total to body weight ratio possible to put up a specific dots, which again, versus competing head to head in a three-way battle is entirely different. One, you actually can maximize your total. The other, you're focused on winning. This one is more fun to me. So the Arnold by nature is not this. It's not even the same. Like yeah,
I can tell you right now when you're a viewer watching, if you guys are all in the same weight class going toe to toe, slugging it out, I'm right on the edge of my seat. If you guys are in multiple different weight classes, but the same flight and it's like dots, it's not the same.
no, it's
Because
not.
you're telling me this formula is the proper way, but I can punch in three different other formulas and get different rankings. How do I know, oh, this person's better than Ashton because they're dots? So this person just beat Ashton, even though Ashton out totaled him by 150 kilos. I'm not convinced. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
sports fans are going to watch and be like, but Ashton's 150 kilos stronger. And if I swap out dots and put on IPF points, everything changes. If I
yeah.
swap out IPF points, put in Wilks,
Looks it
everything
changes a
changes.
lot
If
again. Yeah,
if I swap out dots and put in this new freaking USCPL formula, want to get your opinion on that, by the way, everything changes again. So when your whole competition is based off of that formula, it should be a secondary note. Like IPF Worlds, you win in your weight class head to head. Best lifter will be that, but best lifter isn't going to give your national team points. It's not going to give you a world title. It's like a caveat at the end. But when you have the tournament itself is based off of a formula, it becomes, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not the same, man. Like
No,
you put it perfectly. I totally agree. It's not the same at all, man. Like I don't even competing in them, speaking as a competitor and a contender to place in those events because winning them are very difficult. It's just it's not. I don't even have as much fun competing in those. It's just not the same. Um, yeah, like because even with Sheffield, right? Even when you look at Sheffield, there's like a lot of moving pieces on how like the winners determined and with records and stuff like that, which was a pretty cool aspect. But there were some interesting weight class battles in that meet too, right?
yeah,
Like that kind of made it more exciting to watch for me. Watching the 93s duke it out. That was awesome. Watching the 105s do
76s,
their thing. Yeah.
57s. Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
all those weight
Yeah.
classes, right? Most of those weight classes had some, depth and talent at that meet, and it was fun to watch the best of the best kind of just duke it out and go against each other, and that's what I really love in powerlifting, or really in most sports for that matter, is just that direct head to head, confrontation, right? um,
100%.
but this whole dots thing, I'm not too enamored with it either. And as far as the whole USAPL, like thinking about making a new formula, I don't know too much about it, but we're already oversaturated with formulas and trying to figure out oh well they weigh this much, they lift this much, so it's technically more impressive than that. And I mean I think you can make some arguments there, like Perkins putting up an 851 kilo total at 74 point something is pretty damn impressive. Just like that's like an all-time kind of performance, right? But for the most part, outside of like those very, very rare exceptions, there's just not a lot of yeah, if a guy is totaling 200 kilos less than me, but you're telling me his formula points are like a couple points higher, nothing against the guy. He's probably a phenomenal lifter, right? That's not what I'm getting at. But what I'm saying is, to me, it's just like, is this really more impressive though? It's yeah.
Or even like, how accurate can you tell me it is that he's pound for pound stronger when there's going to be 4 or 5 different formulas? Why are there 4 or 5? Like I've talked to your point, you brought up Sheffield. The reason why Sheffield decided to base it off world records and percentage of world records, because they want to avoid creating another formula by looking at data points and drawing a line through it. And how many different ways you could make a formula? If you keep making more and more and more, you're more or less proving the point you can't make the most accurate formula. It's impossible. How
Yeah.
come they all don't predict the same winner? Because these formulas are just that data points, which you're drawing a line through. And Sheffield attempted 2 things, to your point, and then we'll double back to the USAPL one. But Sheffield was like, it's just you versus history. How far can you push it? Like when Atwood did 838.5, the reason why Taylor was like, he was so many leagues ahead of what we'd ever seen in that weight class.
Mhm.
Say less. Oh my God, you're literally ahead of your time. If a 100-meter race runner destroys the record or just small chips it, that's what Sheffield was doing, is like, well, let's not read data points, how you read it, how I read it, or here's how our formula works. It's more just literally, here's the record. Where are you in
Yep.
proximity to the
This is the
history?
bar. How
It's
far are you
easy.
from it? Yeah.
Yeah. How far are you ahead? And also doubling up on that, they also, like you said, specifically targeted very dense showdowns. They brought it in 57s, 76s, 93s. We had 266s, whatever. I won't go through the whole roster, but they did that on purpose as well. So stacking the deck. But in terms of the USAPL formula that they're talking about now, here's a couple things that I noted. I haven't dropped the podcast yet with Devin Williams, but we discussed this. One of the reasons why the viewership of USAPL Nats is so much lower than IPF Worlds now, and there's a couple moves that USAPL's done that I think if they read the temperature of the room, they wouldn't have done these moves. But
Mm.
when I have people on the podcast and I ask them, who do you watch in powerlifting? You're an athlete. Who do you watch? Almost always, everyone watches their own weight class and maybe a weight class up, maybe a weight class down. Sometimes if they're powerlifting nerds like me, they'll watch all weight classes and they're super duper fans of the sport. But
Yep.
usually, but we're minorities, like in terms of when you're like that. Usually you watch your own weight class up, weight class down. USAPL leaves the rest of the world and changes the weight classes. Mistake number one, my friend, the rest of the world now does not have their own weight class in your federation.
Yep.
The rest of the world now doesn't compare themselves to you. They don't have 57s. It's like a star-studded class. 63s, 69s. And when they look at the USAPL, same with like the 10, I don't got to tell you, the 105s and the 110s. Now, you guys all weight around 105. Good. That's this year. But in years to come, years past, whatever,
It'd be different.
when we move forward, the rest of the world isn't going to see their own weight classes. They'll tune in and be like, what? That's a huge factor. 100%. And if you pay attention to what people say, they almost always say, I pay attention to people, my own body weight, my own weight class. That's one mistake. Number two, when with the dots, okay, IPF does IPF points. Dots is still kind of used throughout the world in the untested, etc. If you're going to go a completely new formula in whatever pro series, whatever the heck you're going to do, if you're going to base it off of a formula the rest of the world doesn't use, doesn't understand, already people are caring less and less about formulas, you're going to further dilute the quality and credibility of a formula by making your own that nobody else uses. And I won't even know if that's, I don't know, like when you tell me your formula numbers for the new USAPL one, the rest of the world's going to be like, I don't know, is that good?
What
Is
does
it
that mean?
bad? What does that
Yeah.
mean? What does that mean? You're going to give me a formula in a weight class that are not mine. Now you're further and further on your own island. I don't have the same weight class when I watch you, and you have a formula. I don't even know what the hell's going on.
Yep.
You're getting worse and worse. You're backing up. You're actually, these aren't good moves. I don't
Yeah.
understand why they're doing this.
Yeah. I can't speak to why they're doing that either. I don't really, functionally understand what the thought process is behind that decision. And I kind of carry a similar sentiment. I just think that again, we're already oversaturated with formulas. Throwing in another formula into the mix is not going to make. There's just no net gain or positive here that I can see, right? So it's a decision that I disagree with. And don't get me wrong, I'm a guy who loves competing in the USAPL. And the national event this year was actually, aside from being in Memphis, like it was actually really fun.
Devin talked about that, by the way.
Yeah,
Devin
that
said, he goes,
dude,
dude,
Devin,
Memphis,
yeah,
he's like, he said Memphis is like voted the most violent city in America. I think maybe behind Chicago or something. I forget. I have to re-listen to the podcast. But he's like, dude, Memphis is you got to be careful. I'm like, really? I didn't know.
yeah, yeah. It's not a nice. It's not necessarily nice. But yeah, aside from that, okay, minus that part, the rest of nationals, competing, minus that, and then minus the whole, schedule change that happened like pretty close to the meet where the 110s were moved to Sunday instead of Saturday. Like minus that stuff, actually competing, the equipment that we used, and stuff like that, all that stuff was pretty good. Like, and it was actually a fast paced. Our session was very, very fast because our flight was, I want to say 7 lifters.
Oh wow.
So, like we're not only hitting these weights, but we're hitting these weights with like 5 to 7 minute like rest periods, like half of what you might get at most other meets. So this was kind of like almost like an IPF world flight, basically in terms of speed. That's pretty much what it was. And even when I did worlds way, 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 way eons ago, like that flight was also like very small, like I think 8 guys or something like that, and it felt like that. I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing today. Which is fine. I train fast, so I'm used to it. But yeah, that was another
To your
factor to consider.
Yeah, to your point, those are the factors that are different than when you're at the gym, taking your own time, working
Yep.
up to your squat max. The totally different ball game when you show up at a competition and it's 7 minute turnaround and you got to rock and roll, pick your attempt in 60 seconds. How did that feel? Felt okay, but well, good because you got to go again in like 5 minutes.
Yeah. So
Like
gotta
you
get
got no
ready, man.
time. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The weight's
good.
only getting heavier. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, whole nother ball game.
So I was really happy actually that I was able to take two 800 plus pound, squats in the same meet. And do them like to depth and do them convincingly and clean and stuff like that, because that's tough under that time frame for
let's
sure.
talk about meet day. Let's dive in, and then we're going to talk about the future as well. But so squats were on. You had an absolutely phenomenal squat session. In terms of the warm up, in terms of are you paying attention to what other people are doing? In by the time it wrapped, I got to think I think you alluded earlier. You thought, oh, I think I might have this. Did you think you might have this already?
Yeah. So it was interesting. So it was hard not to see what everybody else was doing. And you want to know why?
Why's that?
Well, all three of us were warming up on the same rack.
Oh shit!
The whole meet, the same bar, the same rack. Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. We were warming up right in the same spot, all three of us, just, watching each other the whole time, every single thing everyone's doing. And it was so funny.
That is so bizarre.
It was intense. Yeah. Super intense.
Man, but not only so that can get in your head or give confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, usually, here's the thing: if you're feeling it, if you're around someone who's in the zone feeling it and they're murdering weights and the bar speed is beautiful in the warm-up room, and you look over and they're like, you could tell because we've all had that before. If that's your opposition having one of those days, that can get in your head. Flip side, if you're not having a good day, you're like, fuck it, kind of a little slow, little whatever, but you can't even be honest about it on your face. You can't even be honest about it to your handler right beside you because the guy's right there vibing.
Yeah.
And
Pressure.
your lack of confidence or your fuck, I'm not feeling great gives me my more steam. When I'm starting to doubt a little, but I look over at you and see you struggling, I'm like, nah, I'm all right. It's the reason why MMA fights and boxing matches, they legitimately, when one guy's tired in the corner, they're like, don't worry, the other guy's even more tired.
Yep.
And it gives you hope. It's like, don't worry. He's however you're feeling, he's feeling worse. That's always what they say in every single corner. But when you're in the warm-up room and you're sharing a freaking warm-up
Yeah.
platform, it's literally like, fuck, if I'm feeling bad, don't let him know because it gives him courage.
No, it
It
was
gives
funny.
him
This was crazy. This was crazy. Okay, so squats, my warm-ups were flying like crazy. They all felt good. And then even my opener, my last warm-up was like I think 600, and then I opened with 738, which for me is actually a normal jump. So
it was
it's crazy. That all felt really good actually. And the other thing for me is I actually put in very conservative openers too, and I also take massive jumps. So that's another thing I think for me competitively that gives me like an edge, a competitive edge, because psychologically it just messes with people when you open with like, say 335 on squat or 325 on deadlift, and then you jump 40 or 50 kilos and then you destroy it. They're just like, what?
squat too. You did 335 to 371 on
Yeah.
squats.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yep. Yep. And those are the kinds of things and jumps that it'll get in someone's head, for sure. But yeah, so yeah, that it was on, right? And I didn't want to show any weakness, even with bench press. Like, so because the meet was moving faster than we expected, and we didn't really have time to warm up for benches, I hit 155 pounds and then 407 pounds, and then those were my two warm-ups for bench. So yeah. So that's probably why my bench day didn't go as good as I expected. I didn't feel stable. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We still tied the meet PR, which was good, 215. So we walked away with a good bench there. And then with deadlifts, this was really interesting. So we were all deadlifting in the same area, and I was, planning to pull conventional because that's what I trained. And with the back flare up, pulling conventional on the day it just wasn't there. It hurt really badly. Like it was moving fast, but I knew, hey, like these three reds, like this is okay. But if I put on 7 reds, I don't think this is gonna end well for me. Right.
Hmm.
So Marcellus and I, we were like, I talked to him, I'm like, hey man, like the back is like after like the squats and just after the last few weeks, that we had where we just kind of had that flare up, I'm like, this isn't safe. we're gonna have to pull sumo.
So did you do that decision right there on the spot in the warm-up room?
Yep, at 4 reds while warming up.
Okay, so first off, that's fucking crazy. And I'm sure so for anyone listening, just to catch up story-wise, Keenan and Bobb and you, well, sorry, Bobb goes 6 for 6 on the squat and bench. Keenan and you both missed your last bench press. So going into deadlifts, You're confident because you absolutely murdered squats. You lost 5 kilos on bench. Okay, nothing super duper crazy. I
I
mean,
had
you
the
could
meat
maybe
PR
gate
and hit
that.
what I needed. Yeah.
Right, right. But this conversation, A, would that not scare the shit out of you day of switching like that? B, when you have that conversation, you're all on the same platform. My friend, if I'm on that platform and I'm Bobb or Keenan, I'm like, did I just hear this dude make a game day decision to totally switch from sumo to conventional? Because that would give me confidence. That would be
Yeah.
chatter.
And it might have. I don't know. Like once they saw me pulling sumo instead of conventional, they were probably like, what? And then Bob, I actually told Bob directly. I was like, you know what? I'm not even gonna lie to him. I was like, hey Bob, like back is killing me right now. I think I'm just gonna pull sumo. And he was like, don't do it, man, because you know in his mind it's like this is gonna go bad. And I'm just like, dude, I can't do conventional today. It's just not there. I know it. So, I was like, we'll see what happens. Yeah. Which was really funny. I mean,
Rick, dude,
he had
what
like
were
a
you?
like that.
Were you nervous? Were you like,
Oh yeah.
what? Until then, you're confident. You said after squats, you're like, I got this. I'm gonna win this. But then once that happened, were you like, okay, we're right back to 50-50. I don't know what the shit's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Well,
literally I had no idea what the outcome was going to be. And that's honestly what made it so exciting too, because you just don't know what's about to happen. You're like, is this going to end good, bad? Like, no matter how it ends and how you feel afterwards, in that moment, I enjoyed it because I was like, this is exciting. It was scary, but it was exciting. And I'm like, am I going to get hurt? Like
yeah,
other stuff, this is a lot of weight. But we made a really smart decision on this. And, from what we had originally planned versus what we actually put in for openers on meet day, I was like, well, backsman, 8 key. And I feel a lot better going into the meet, which I think is what allowed me to squat so much. Because again, I'm not like quite lifting at 100% at the meet, but like, pretty good. So I was like, okay. I was like, so the back is like strong and we're strong and we're on, everything's on. It's just, doing this specific movement is really painful and it could seriously lead to some problems, like getting hurt badly. So, with all of that said, we just sort of made the executive decision to, like, hey, like if we need to pull someone, we can, one. And then two, we lowered the opener to 325. So,
gotcha.
so we didn't actually lower it during the meet. We lowered it, on the day of the morning when I weighed in and put in my openers. I'm like, let's open with 325 instead of like 340 or, whatever we originally planned. Right. If deadlifts were feeling good or on. So we opened with 325. And that was awesome because, my last warm up usually is like 5 reps anyway. So I go out, 6 reps is on the bar, 717, 325, and I hit it, and it actually moves pretty good. I'm like, oh, okay, we're in. I'm like, okay, so we can make the jump. And then I just went up to Marcellus. He was like, what do you want next? And I said, put in whatever like puts me in the lead, right? So he puts in 372.5, which fun fact is the same weight that I pulled to win 2021 nationals against Bryce Lewis, I think, for second attempt. It was the same second attempt, 372.5. And so that's a special number for me, a lucky number probably. And we put it in, and I hit it, and it actually moved pretty good. I was shocked. I was like, wow, this is actually going a lot better than I thought.
Yeah,
And,
like,
and
thank
then
God.
yeah, so we put in, I think it was 388.5. It was like 856 pounds, which is
That's right.
I think 14 pounds less than my training PR for sumo. And in a meet, it would have been a 12-pound PR. And it moved good. I mean, I don't really know what happened. I guess one side kind of like dipped or something, but I actually felt like I had a little bit more left over there too, because I can really grind a deadlift. So I was like, wow, this is crazy. So that was also pretty interesting data too. But yeah,
Well, like for you to drop the deadlift was smart when you're not you weren't sure about your back, so you dropped it earlier in the day, like you said. Then
yep,
you flipped over from conventional sumo, which thank God you had dropped it. If you hadn't earlier, you probably would have dropped it then, anyways. When you decided to do a switch like that,
yeah,
so
we would
you
have had that.
solidified your total, and you got a chance to solidify your total and test things out, how it's going to move. The big thing though, when jumping to your second, which is almost a 50-kilo jump, 47.5-kilo jump, which is a pretty monstrous jump, becomes a bit of an all or nothing. That
Yeah,
second attempt, you didn't know it at the time, but that second attempt was literally going to win you the title. It
win
was
or
going to
lose.
win you
Yeah,
the showdown. It was everything.
yep.
It's a 50-kilo jump and you switch from conventional sumo. Like that's a huge, it's dicey, but you
It was
have
a
to
big
play with
deal.
the hands you're given.
Yep.
You don't know your back's going to flare up. You don't even have to switch stances right off the bat. You don't know. And Ashton, thank God you have the opportunity to switch up. Most people are just, if you're a sumo puller and your hip, well, like hips is an issue with sumo, and your hip
Yep.
flares up, you can't just switch to conventional and still win. You'd probably
No.
switch to conventional, not bomb out, but you're going to go from fighting for first to fighting for fifth.
Yep.
Same with vice versa. You're a conventional puller, you switch to sumo,
And
well, you're probably just getting your total
you've
and
never pulled
piecing
sumo?
out.
Yeah, there's no way. There's no way.
You're lucky. It's your switch hitting is it's pivotal for you, and it's
Yes.
so rare that your sumo and conventional are so close together. Thank God you've been working on this for years.
I have
You're
to credit
very
that.
rare that you can do that.
I have to credit that to Gene Bell. And I will agree partially that yes, I am, I'm lucky enough to be able to do both well. But I will also say it was a lot of hard work. So there were plenty of times over the years where I would train both simultaneously, like concurrently, that's at the same time, or I would train them on and off. So I've gotten to a point where I'm very confident that if I haven't touched it in months and I walk up to it, as long as I've been training heavy, I can pick up over 800 pounds, either style.
I mean, that's a huge benefit for some people. Just biomechanically, one is going to be so much ahead of the
Way
other.
better than the other. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yep.
is what it is. They could do better by working on the other form, but it's just never going to be quite where like yours.
That's where the luck
Um,
comes in. It's just a matter of just having the mechanics to do both well. Yeah.
but to your point, you for years have sharpened your technique and got yourself as good as you can so that you could switch it. Another person who's done it, Corolla Gara, injured, got an injury at the Arnold Classic,
Hmm.
and going into the World Championships, switched over from sumo to conventional. You don't see that often. You don't see that often. Switch from sumo to conventional, one IPF Worlds, go in the Sheffield, blah blah blah. If you can do it, my God, is it you're good because injury pops
Yeah.
up and you're like, well, I got options. I
I
got
can do
other
the other
options.
thing. Yeah. You can pull out plan B. That's how I am with everything in life, including competing. Like I have these contingency plans. I have these doomsday scenarios in my head. And I'm like, what if this happens and this happens and this happens? And it's just a totally ridiculous scenario, you know? Lo and behold, on the day of nationals, that ridiculous scenario played out. And I'm like, well, at least we've
It's
got
a I like how you're like, look at I've got like 35 ridiculous scenarios that are never going to happen, but one of them did on nationals, and I
yeah,
was ready. And
yeah.
now who's laughing? But it's true, man. It is true. So when we go into this, so you miss narrowly 388.5. Now Bobb's coming out to 392 and a half. Keenan's coming out to 396.5. When you're sitting back watching this, how are you feeling? Are you confident? Are you nervous? And then tell me when you realize I did it. I won the battle of the 110s. And I mean, we don't have odds in powerlifting. I don't know if you were a favorite or a underdog. Do you feel like you were an underdog? Do you feel like I upset the odds or
I think I did. Yeah. I think
really?
honestly, if
Okay.
we took a like population level, poll of everyone that I guess participates and or watches like powerlifting, no matter how big would that would be, I think more people would have Bob as a favorite to win that than me. Which, I was okay with. I was like, well, they don't know what I know. And I've got, abilities like being able to switch it that nobody else has, you know. So, I think I can do this. But watching them do their last deadlifts, just because of the weight that was there, and because of how fast we were moving and the day that we had, and all that had happened, I was, if I had to put like a number to it, I would say I was like 80% sure that neither of them were going to hit their third deadlifts. I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
I don't
Okay.
think this is going to happen. I'm going to like, cheer them on, and if they hit it, the better man won. Like
Right.
at least the better man on the day, the better performing man on the day won, right? Because we know the strongest doesn't necessarily always win, but who put up the most attempts, the best attempt selection, who won, right?
Mm.
And hey, I would have, better man won, right? That's that 20% that it might happen, but 80% of me was like, I don't think either of these guys are going to hit these numbers. And it's not because I don't think they're strong enough per se to do it. I think it's because we're in a fast-paced meet. This is like a ninth, a final attempt. There's fatigue from everything else going on. There's a lot of pressure to hit this, and any little thing with their technique or whatever could just completely disqualify them from winning this meet. So the odds of them hitting these numbers right now is low, right? And I think both of them would admit that too. Just as like from an objective competitive standpoint, right? So that's kind of how I viewed that. But I didn't want to celebrate until it was over. So I waited until the
Yeah, oh,
final
yeah, oh, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, hey. Yeah, we've seen that. I mean, it's
yeah.
the hardest. But so when it did dawn on you, I just won the battle of the 110s. By far the biggest, most competitive clash at USAPL Nats this year. And when it dawned on you, I just won this. What were you thinking? What was the talk in your corner? And what was the communication with Bobb and Keenan afterwards?
I was just relieved. I was relieved it was over, but I was also relieved that I had won. So gave Christian a really big hug. And then, I like almost killed Steve Donovi in excitement. And it was fun. But yeah, I know, with Keenan and Bobb, Keenan and Bobb, so I consider both of them like friends. So every time we do these events or I see them, I usually like hang out with them outside of the competition too, because I genuinely like both of them a lot. They're good guys. And, you know, like I know that it hurt, like to lose that, for both of them. And, because if I had lost, I would have felt the exact same way. And I understand that it wasn't just me and how hard I worked, but they also did the same thing. They probably sacrificed, they probably worked really hard. They trained for months for this and, just did not come out on top or didn't have the day they wanted and it didn't pan out, the way they wanted it to. And so, I was definitely sympathetic towards that. And, I definitely respect them as, competitors and even after the meet, like I wouldn't be, haughty or arrogant or get in their, face or nothing like that. It cause a scene. But I mean, but like I genuinely felt for those guys and I was like, man, like to work this hard and to, do so much and for Keenan to travel across the world to be here, for Bobb to, really dial in every single variable possible just to be able to have the opportunity like to compete with me and to beat me, directly. And for them also to opt out of the primetime session to compete in the morning with me. I've got nothing
I
but,
appreciate that. Yeah. That
yeah,
was class by both of those
it
guys.
was it's honor, it's honor and integrity. It's honor amongst, competitors. And it's something that I just so deeply cherished and respected. And that really made this specific like battle one of the best I've ever done for me. So it was amazing. Yeah. And
Maybe mention that because some people listening might not know, but the backstory there, how you couldn't do the prime time, and they both said they had a huge sporting advantage over you, and they said no, thank you. That's not how I want to win. Which
yep.
hats off, like that's amazing that both of them did that. But maybe tell the backstory on how that happened. And
Yeah, sure. Let me spin the quick story on this. So what happened was Monday after Sunday. So we were originally going to live Let me start here. We were originally going to live Saturday prime time, the 110s, which was fine. It's Saturday evening. We finished Sunday. We can head home, do whatever, right? So what happened was not too far out from the meet, the 110s were moved from Saturday to Sunday. That put me in a bind because won't get into too much, about like my career and stuff on here, but I'm active duty military. And the next day is a duty day. And it's a day that's like non-negotiable that I can't miss and I need to be there. So, I was like, okay, well, let's try to figure this out. What can I do? I can't do primetime Sunday because I won't get back in time. So I told myself, well, if I drive there, so I don't have to leave it up to chance, like of missing a flight or a flight getting canceled or something. If I drive to Memphis, it's an 11-hour drive where I live. I was like, okay, drove to Memphis, and after I compete, if I compete in the regular session, which will happen in the morning, I'll be able to drive back afterwards, make it back in time. I won't sleep, but I'll wake up and I'll be there then at work the next day. And and it panned out exactly as I planned, which was thank God, it's beautiful. But yeah, it was tough. And so with that being said, I couldn't do primetime. You know, I have like my priorities and my duties, and there's things that I cannot neglect. So I couldn't do prime time. So I opted to compete in the morning session, as I said. Bobb and Keenan, you know, I let them know that this was happening. I think their coaches, like everybody, let them know this was happening, you know, and they wanted to compete with me more than they wanted to win for the sake of winning, right? So they both opted and agreed, and all of us agreed we're all going to compete together in the morning session. And you know what? If Bobb or Keenan had a similar predicament, I know that I would do the same thing because we all three of us, we've all been monitoring each other so closely. We've all been training so hard, and we've all really been anticipating this direct, confrontation for so long that none of us wanted to throw that away and get some cheap win in a primetime session after the other guys had already competed and after the dust is settled, because everyone in the world would know. But more importantly, all three of us, the competitors, would know that it was not the same, and it's not the same.
Dude, that's such a cool story, though. The fact that you pulled from prime time to have to go into the morning. And when your fellow competitors heard that, and for anyone listening, the advantage they would have had
Oh
can't
yeah,
be overstated.
there's almost no way I would have
Huge.
won that. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's
It
no,
was like the fact that they risked it all and went head up with you. That's off. That is like, that's what sports is about. That is a lovely sporting story where they're like, no, this means too much.
yeah,
And yeah, I love that happened.
yeah, yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I think, honor, among us, and we care about competing against the best in the world and formidable opponents. And if we win, we beat them head on. And if we don't win, then the better man on the day won. And that's kind of what that is. But these like cheaper, easy wins, I don't think any of us believe in that.
So you've won this now. The battle of the 110s is concluded. It's been a lot of chatter on what might be next. What is next for you, young man?
Okay, yeah. So I'll let's
First, we're still celebrating.
yeah. So right now, as it stands, I'm registered for a Powerlifting America meet in November in Houston. So that's where I plan to qualify for PA Nationals. The goal from there is to go do PA Nationals and to win, and to PR the total there, and then go to Worlds in Lithuania in June. The goal is to win there, and then in 2025, the goal is, as it stands currently, and this is subject to change, Sheffield. I do want to win Sheffield. I think that I can win Sheffield and the World Games. And I think that would be a great 2-year plan and close things out. It's very ambitious, I know, but I'm an ambitious guy.
It's amazing. Like, if you think IPF Worlds, Sheffield, World Games, like those are events of events. World Games is a multi-sport global event, which is massive. I don't know if you've seen the World Games opening ceremonies and like it's crazy.
I watched
And then
Birmingham.
Sheffield, what's that? Sorry.
I watched them compete in Birmingham.
Okay, well there you go. I'm gonna tell you that it's crazy, man. The experiences and the ambition on this. So when you watched IPF Worlds this summer, did you watch it? Sorry, I'm assuming here.
I did.
Okay,
I
okay.
did.
What were your thoughts on? Because for me, I want your thoughts on competitiveness, the 105s, Anatoly, etc. And then B, what IPF Worlds is looking like now. Because it's keeps leveling up every year. And they have like crowds with stands and the vibe. They had people with drums beating. Like when New Zealand people hit, they had people beating, literally beating drums, and the French are standing with flags yelling. And it was like, ruckus, as
Yeah.
opposed to previous IPF Worlds were not like this. Every year it's getting crazier and crazier.
Oh, it's changing. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
changing. Even from back when I did it way back then, and from what I've seen the years after that, and then the last couple of years, it's really changed, and it's leveling up. And I think we're really close in a lot of weight classes to eclipsing a lot of the records that exist now and putting up some really massive totals and just some awesome performances. Um, I'm excited for the opportunity. I'm excited for the challenge. Um, at this time, my plan is to compete in the 105s, not 120 or not 93, which I did consider, by the way. Fun fact.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, I could make that cut. Um, but right now the plan is to do 105s and to go head to head with Anatoly, Emil, and whoever else wants to show up, and and thinks they can win and duke it out with all of them in Lithuania. And I think this will be good for them too, because I think for a while there hasn't been anyone to push them in that weight class. But if I come over there, then they have to be better or they won't win. So it's just really just by numbers. Like, that's not being me being arrogant. That's just like me being an objective minded competitor. Like, if they don't improve, they won't win.
That's look at me. You earned the right to say this. Numbers, men lie, women lie, numbers don't.
Just don't. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
And I know that they can both get better than they are too. I know they both can improve, and I know that they both have potential to be something, yeah, just better. And I want to pull that potential out of them, and I want another dogfight. So, I'm hungry for it.
um the discussion because Bob is all like he was on the podcast previously, even like well before even this nationals, talking about ambitions of 120, etc. Exact timelines weren't sure, and this battle hadn't concluded yet. But have you had any discussions? Do you know which way Bob will go, or do you think Bob's still humming and hawing on 105, 120?
I think we're pretty much locked in what we want to do. And I think Bob is probably going to go 120.
That's a 15. Well, I guess he doesn't have to fill it out though.
No, he doesn't plan to fill out 120.
I was gonna say that that's a weight class limit, but not minimum. And sometimes you forget that. Like, whoa, he's gonna add 15 kilo. Maybe, maybe not.
In a
But yeah,
year, in a year or so, like, I could see him being an actual 110 and, weighing 110, competing 120, and actually doing really well.
Mhm.
Really, really
Yeah.
well. So it'll be interesting. It'll definitely be interesting to see what he does. It'll be interesting to see what Keenan does too. I'm like, I know, like, with their IPF affiliate, I don't want to get too much into it, but I know that it's just kind of messy there. But I mean, man, I would really love for Keenan to come over to 105 and just because I want to compete with Keenan again. I want to compete with Bob again, but it's just how that would happen. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I mean, again, hats off to those two gentlemen. I really appreciated that competition, and it was one of the most intense ones I've ever done, and it was it felt the best winning because I felt like I truly earned it and I gave everything I had, and there was just nothing sweeter. So
Um, in terms of Keenan, is he a dual citizen American as well? Okay,
mhm.
well then he could, I think, go powerlifting America if he wanted to.
Yeah, that might
And
be
I
conversation.
mean, and he weighed in 105 point, a
Yep.
little extra change. Like he could. I mean, and then frick, what are we talking about here? Like that, if
Might see
he's
a
dual
world with
citizen,
man. It would just be crazy just to have a team, a U.S. team with two 105s.
it could happen, my dude. If
Yeah.
Keenan decides, hey, you know what? I'm going powerlifting in America. I'm sure. Look, you're dual citizen, rock and roll. Let's see what happens. I mean, the thing is, a U.S. is so stacked. You have Petrie coming over, so the 93s will be stupid stacked with Gavin, Petrie, and Kaiko. It
Yep.
might be two 93s, it might be two 105s, but then you have like Delaney Wallace, double world champion 83, but then you have Russ. It could be two 83s, like let alone 74s. You got Atwood and Perk. Like, I mean,
And Bernstein.
US's B team
Yeah.
is going to be crazy, let
Insane.
alone the
Still
A
world
team.
class. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't wait to see these battles because the world's unite. So yeah, I would love if Keenan comes over, even if we just get the CPA Nats, it's going to be phenomenal showdown. Let alone if you guys all make a world team. And the thing with Bob, if he goes 120 for sure, and that's the route he's taking, and then he goes worlds, and then he goes Sheffield. If and this is way down the road, but let's just do for the sake of pathways, because this is how lifters look. They plan on winning. So let's say he wins Worlds and he goes Sheffield.
Mhm.
The 120, because obviously Sheffield was based off of percentage of what you broke the world record. If he's within a cut to 105, but he goes to 120, you're also going Sheffield, you have a smaller world record you have to break than he does. So it is like
Yeah, it's
it's
940
not an easy
versus.
path.
Yeah,
Hats off to him, but it's like you're gonna
it's
have to
tough.
face Ashton, and Ashton has a lower barometer he has to hit,
Yeah.
conceivably, right? Like,
One of the biggest things that this meet showed me was I was inches away from hitting a 990.5 total that day with the back that was like mildly strained. And I did it at 105 point, whatever.
yeah,
I know for a fact now that whatever my potential is at 105, I haven't hit it yet. I haven't filled it out. And I'm really excited to do that. So the world record total right now for 105s is 940, I believe. And I
that's right.
think for 120, it's 978. And I think
That's a
I can
big
beat 120
difference,
at
man.
105. Yeah. I honestly, and it's a big difference. We're talking a 38 kilo difference. Which 15 kilo body weight difference makes sense. That tracks logically. But I want to beat that total at 105 by like a lot.
Here's one thing too. Let me throw this out there, and
Yeah.
and I'm bringing Rondel on. Rondel Hunte is coming on the podcast, and we're going to discuss future plans, yada yada. But if Rondel sits out a year and comes back, now the last time he competed was USAPL Nats. By the time he competes again, will be that eligible to compete will be next fall. And I don't know what comp he's going to do or whatever the heck, but by the time the next Sheffield rolls around, will be the following year again.
Yep.
So I don't know the timeline. I don't know events, whatever. But when Rondel comes, when Bobb goes 120, whether he has to deal with Rondel at a world scenario or deal with Rondel at whatever scenario head to head, or whether he has to deal with a total Rondel puts up somewhere or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, there's too many things floating around here, but Rondel should conceivably be coming to 120's IPF side. That's
Yeah.
another piece where he's an ambitious, fearless young man.
Yeah.
God bless
Yeah.
him.
He
Because
sure is.
maybe he doesn't deal with Rondel for another year after that, but maybe he does. I don't know. It's all like, because Rondel's over a G. He's already there. So I don't know. I don't know.
I
It's
would love to
crazy to
see
me.
it. I would love to see it. I really wish Rondell would have been able to like stay in our weight class, but because to compete with us, because that would have been probably the craziest four we got over. But
Was a
but
105 or a 110? You mean?
okay,
Sorry. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yep, that would have been insane. But I think he's in the weight class he belongs in, and he performs really well there. I think it's good for him and like his body and his competitive aspirations. So he's where he needs to be, and I respect it. But man, that would have been crazy. But it would be
Oh yeah.
good to see him go over to the IPF and then do it. Um, Rondell is an amazing competitor. I would love to see what it would look like with him having a head-to-head battle again, where he could win or lose, and how he would perform there. Because again, it's entirely different. It's an entirely different thing. I alluded to this earlier. Head-to-head competitions, you're putting in numbers to win, or not necessarily register, the biggest total you possibly can, but register the biggest total you need to win. Whereas there's also competing where you come in, there's really no pressure or stress from any competition, and you just put up the biggest total that you can, and you
Right.
just do. Like when I
Right.
was a junior in the 220 weight class, I weighed 217 and I put up 2095. And that was like me, like YOLOing a third deadlift and like not even putting as much pounds as I could have on the total either. Like that was just like me having fun. So that felt a lot different, right? In terms of competing than like competing with Bobb and Keenan. Like totally
Mm.
different. So I would love to see like him actually have some competition to push him. That'd be awesome to see, because Rondell is like a phenomenal lifter. He's a good dude too. I love like I've seen him in person a few times now. I've gotten to meet him and hang out with him a bit. I really like the guy, and I would love to see him compete. Not just lift and put up a performance we can marvel at, but to compete. That's what I want to see. So it would be cool. It'd be cool.
Bobb will bring that out of him. If
Yeah.
Bobb, like, conceivably, look, we're kind of adding body weight onto Bobb, then adding totals, kilos onto his total. it's hard to predict necessarily exactly. Not everybody, because you add body weight, does your total to shoot up, but some people it does.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. And maybe Bob attempts it, feels what it feels like, and then maybe he turns around and he's like, you know what? He could always change his mind.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
That's
it's
true.
experimental for him too. You got to double check. But in terms of for yourself, so you had mentioned for sure 105s, and I think for sure that's the best route. Go 105 for worlds, and then you see the potential to just take that world record and run with it for Sheffield, for World Games, etc. But do you think in the future to keep yourself, in terms of options, cutting adding weight to 120 just to see, let's max out, or you ever think, let's get diced up? The 93s have sensational battles. Maybe Russ is a 93 by then. You already know the 93s are stacked every
If what
year.
the year after I finished 105, because I'm pretty set on 105 this year. Like the year after, if granted, like I'm still competing at that level at this point and contention for like world title. If Russ went 93, I would cut down to 93. I would love that matchup. That would be such a crazy matchup. And I've always
Oh,
wanted to
yeah.
be with Russ, but our weight classes have always just been different. But that would be so much fun. It'd be a big honor. And if that were in the cards, if he cut to 93 and I was feeling it, him and whoever else, that'd be a
he,
fun.
he announces he announces on Monday 93. You announce on Tuesday 93.
Yeah. I, I would love it. And it would be good too because it would give me time to actually like cut down to like, maybe 210ish, like safely, and then, water cut into the meat, stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I mean it's on my radar, right? Like it's not, it may not necessarily be the most likely outcome, but it is on my radar and it is something that's in the back of my mind. 120 is also in the back of my mind. I've thought about doing 120, going up to about 250 pounds of body weight and doing that for a year. And then after that being done.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. This is an exciting time right now, but I think for now, without getting myself too carried away, I think 105s is a good move, and I think for me competitively and what I'll be able to put up in terms of total and weight lifted, I think it's a really good middle ground and compromise.
It's so for sure, obviously, yeah, you want to see through 105s. In the intrigue about 120 is the intrigue about just maximizing pure all out. If you were as big as you can be, how strong you could be. And that's always intriguing so that you could hang your hat and be like, I saw my top end max possible output. But the intrigue with Russ, because you're not the only guy who's mentioned, hey, for a clash with Russ, there's something about, is it with Russ, the fact that he brings so much eyeballs and the fact that, like, as hype as this showdown was,
Yeah.
my God, if you clash with Russ, let's say Sheffield, because you both would be world champions by that point if you're both going to Sheffield. So let's do hypotheticals here. Is it that potential of, my man, if I'm world champ at 105, you're world champ at 83, if we both agree to meet in the middle or whatever the heck, like, is it because all the attention and eyeballs Russ brings that makes it that, what do you think it is? Because you're not the only person who said looking for
Yeah.
Russ.
I have an interesting answer. So it has nothing to do with his popularity. That's the funniest thing. That what it has to do with me for Russ personally is he is the competitive juggernaut. He is the man to beat. He is very, very hard to beat. I've lost meets, Keenan's lost meets, Bob's lost meets. Russ hasn't really like lost. I mean, maybe he did years ago, sure, but like once he got on his competitive streak, he just kept winning and winning and winning and winning.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. And every year people are like, oh, someone's gonna beat him, someone's gonna beat him, And then he wins again. Like it's one of the coolest things to see, like, and like as a again, speaking as like an objective like competitor, to me, his like accolades and his resume is very impressive because he is a competitive juggernaut. He just wins a lot. He's just good at winning.
Fair
And
enough.
I would love to be able to compete with that and win. So it's just it's super cool. he just wins, and that's a guy that I would want to go against, and it would be a unique challenge, and it would pull the best out of me undoubtedly, like competing with these other top level guys has, and it'd be something cool to chase. I don't know.
I think, yeah, the last time he lost was 2018 with Brett Gibbs. And since
Gibbs.
then, to your point, when people don't realize how difficult it is to win at this level, and it's not like he's in a weight class that's unpopulated. 82 and a half and 83s are stacked every year.
Oh yeah,
This is not like an oddball weight class. This is one of those super duper heavy populated weight classes. And you like you mentioned, like yourself, Ashton, Bobb, whoever you want to mention, will lose every now and then because it's sport. When you compete for years, time after time, you win. You like you guys are obviously all like freaking ridiculously talented athletes, but to never lose for year after year after year at the top end in such a competitive weight class is, when I think about it off the top of my head,
intense.
he might be the most winningest of the elite lift from 2018.
Yeah, it's probably him.
Even Ray lost since then. Like, yeah, Ray,
Yeah,
man,
that guy
that is
like
quite. You're
that
right.
guy's
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
move. Yeah, it's crazy to watch him compete. The guy just wins over and over. I'm like, man, if I could compete with that guy and if I could beat him, that would be crazy.
If you were the guy to do it, and also, as fun as it is to get like as big as possible, strong as possible, something said to get all diced up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
oh yeah, oh yeah, man, like
it's
for
a new
sure.
challenge to be looking in the mirror, and be like, oh damn, okay,
Yeah,
looking
I'm
good these days.
I'm okay with 93. I mean, one, like being in the military, like weighing that, I can run like the freaking wind at 93
I bet.
kilos, 95 kilos, whatever. And then two, um, I like that weight class, that 205 roundedness weight class, because I can weigh a little bit over that and then easily
Mm.
come to it. And I just don't want to weigh under 200. Like it's just like my one thing. Like I don't want to weigh under 200 right now. And I think 210 to like 215 is that really good, like middle ground where I'm like super, super muscular, like almost no fat. And then, I look good. I can do, anything like athletically and still be really strong and lift a lot of weight and put up like over 2,000 pound totals. And that's kind of what I want. If I go to 93, like I don't intend on totaling less than 2,000. So if memory serves, my first 900 kilo total, I was 22, I think. I weighed 207 at that meet. So I think I was 94 kilos.
Yeah, let me take a look here. I have your IPF.
Yep, that was at a meet. It was the Power Fest in Houston, Texas, back in I want to say 2019.
2019, a Power Fest. My God, have you competed a lot,
Yeah.
my friend? Holy macro. But yeah, to your point, and it's something different. It's just new goals.
Yeah.
After you've done the USAPL Nats, IPF Worlds, Sheffield, and World Games, if you bang all that off for a new challenge and something completely new to get all diced up and look like that when you take your shirt off and people are like, God damn. And you're like, I'm a competitive power lifter. People will be like, yeah, well, I guess. Like when they see you on the beach and they're like, what do you do? You do, you look exactly like, yes, you're a world champion
Yeah.
powerlifter. Like it feels good too.
Yeah, no, for sure. The last time I weighed that, like 205, I was at like 8% body fat. I would love
Oh
to look like that
God.
again, man. Yeah.
I guarantee you're only getting more muscular, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So you'll
So I
be
might
more and
even be
more diced.
freakier like at that weight again for sure. Yeah. So that would be, man, that would be so awesome. But yeah, it's
It,
something brewing in there.
it would take another step in terms of like nutrition coaching and whatever, but that's fine. This is the leveling up because there's 100% you could get to the body weight. The trick is get there while retaining as much muscle mass and strength. So
Strength is
that's where you
possible.
bring
Yeah.
in, like a Kedrick or whatever nutrition guy, or if you already have one, I don't know, but where you're making sure you're hitting your calorie targets, macro targets, and you just keep leveling up like professional athletes do. This is just another step, another layer. And some people are like, I hate doing calories and macros. For me, when I started adding that stuff in, I felt more and more like a legitimate athlete now, where you're like, I have a nutritionist. You know what I mean? You're like, this feels real now. This feels legit now, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, for sure.
Cross
For
that bridge
sure.
when you get there.
Yeah.
My friend, do you want to play a little name game like we did last time, where I drop a name and you could tell me uh, one word answer, two-word answer? You could say a story. You could say there's no right and wrong answers, to tell you the truth. But
Okay.
just off the top of your head, give me a response, and that's it. What do you
All
think?
right.
Okay, easy off the top. Bobb Matthews,
Fierce competitor. Honorable.
Keenan Lee,
Honorable. Massive.
massive.
Massive guy. Yeah.
Is
Huge.
he? See, I've never met him in real life. He looks
He's a
huge.
huge dude. Yeah. He's probably like 6'1" and
Oh
like
shit.
230 pounds of muscle. Yeah. That guy's huge.
Wow, you can't tell on video sometimes, but 6'1's massive for a power lifter.
Yeah. He has a very like a very like powerful appearance, like physically. Yeah, for sure.
Mm. Um, Anatoly Novopismani.
The next guy to beat.
There it is. Fair enough. Marcellus Williams.
Incredible coach and a brother.
Mr. Chessnificent Christian.
One of my best friends, and I'm best man at his wedding. Or will be.
There
Yeah.
you there you go. Best man. Joe Stanek.
Hmm. Incredible athlete performances at the Raw Nationals.
Rondel Hunte.
Powerhouse.
No lies there either. Jesus Olivares.
If he can beat Dan Bell's wrapped record, he's that guy.
And he we'll see.
He might
Put
do
a pin in it. He might
it.
do it, which is freaking insane.
Yeah.
For him to be the best all-time period, tested or untested, at his age.
Yep.
What when Ray Williams was in his prime, he was so far ahead of everyone else. We just thought like
That was it.
Ray is as good
Yeah.
as it gets, and then Jesus comes,
Yeah.
and everything changes. Makes
Big
you rethink
total,
everything.
big total, bigger heart for Jesus. I'll
Right?
also say that.
Yeah, he's a super nice guy. Russel Orhii,
The juggernaut.
he is the juggernaut. Austin Perkins,
Keeping on the heels of the best of all time.
Taylor Atwood,
I hope he gets it together.
yep. It's here's the thing. He's in his mid-30s
It's
and
tough. He's got a
he's won multiple
family.
world. Yeah.
Oh,
A
the life
full-time job,
changes.
family. Yeah. Yeah. It would be great to see him and Perk Atwood at 100%, him and Perk head to head, etc. But
I'd
we'll
love
see.
it.
Only time will tell, hopefully.
I'll pray for
Um,
it.
yeah. And how about this one? Last guy, and then I'll get into a couple of words that aren't names of people, but words, and we'll continue. Same situation. Pete Spence.
He has solid vision. I think he's doing good things for powerlifting, and I think he's learning along the way, and I think he's open to criticism. So there's good things to say there. Yeah, for sure. I like Pete.
He's def
We get along.
for people who don't know, like he's a huge piece with Sheffield and putting together something like PA Nats stream, etc.
Yeah, we got to
And
give the man credit for that. He did well. You know.
it is a crazy like, for something as big as Sheffield. Holy freaking smokes, man! I would not want to take on something like that. The
Yeah,
hype around Sheffield was freaking insane,
it
and
was serious.
everything that SBD is doing. I know you're an SBD athlete, but everything they're doing, it's a lot, man. It's so much in the eye of the entire community and up for scrutiny by the entire community. And the hype on it, I don't even know. I don't know how some of these guys deal with it. Pete and the whole SBD team. So hats off to them because I know the nights and weeks and whatever that they work. There's no time off. So having said that, here's one. IPF Worlds.
When first word that comes to my mind.
Fair enough. Fair enough. How about this one? The next step, Sheffield.
Beat the official IPF 105 and 120 total.
My friend, and that's the last one, and that's freaking you do
Yeah.
that. I mean, we'll see who's all showing up at that Sheffield. But I can't like, can you imagine? We all know who's crossing over. You versus Perk, because Perk can take the 74 kilo total for a ride,
Oh
but
yeah.
you're gonna take the 105s. But like I don't even know.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. To win Sheffield over Perkins, that would be very, very tough, very steep. But I would be up for the challenge, and I'd also be competing with the other 105s there. It would just be crazy. It'd be such a great competition. Um, but yeah, I'm excited for the future. I think there's a lot of good things in store for powerlifting. So I think it's going to be a
Yeah,
really good couple of years.
agreed, man. Agreed. I'm glad. First off, thank you for coming on the podcast. As usual, man. I've been having you on for years, but I appreciate each and every time. Congratulations on the win of the Battle of the 110s, which was a crazy hyped battle. You want to talk about pressure to perform. I'm sure, I mean, there's tons of, but it elevates you. It's a good stress. It forces you to elevate your game, just like you said you're going to bring to IPF Worlds.
Yeah,
And I'm going to see you soon in person, my dude. When you
yeah,
come over to the PA, I'll be commentating. So I'll, can't do any big announcements, but we'll be in touch, my friend. And
absolutely.
it's a pleasure to have you on the IPF side and see what the heck happens. The future is bright. So
Future is bright, my friend.
congratulations, my man. Much appreciated. Good luck with all the training. I'll see you soon. And for everybody listening, please do subscribe, give us high ratings as per usual. And until next time, six pack Lapadat, six
Cheers.
up, and we are out.